All right, welcome to another segment of Good Vibes. I'm Martin False. Joining us, Ms. Debbie Cox-Denova. And there you see her, the lovely Debbie. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good, but on my interviews, I see people that get along just great and others that self-sabotage.
Yes.
Is there such a term? Do they have such people that do that? And why do they do it? And how can we help them today?
That's so great. I have so much information for you. I hope we can fit it all in. Okay, so self-sabotage is something that we as humans do to some degree or another, all of us. We're all prone to self-sabotage in one way or another. It's such a human condition that the ancient Greek philosophers came up with a term called the acrasia effect, which comes from the Greek, which means no power. Okay, so the acrasia effect is simply acting against your own best interest. You know what to do, and I see this a lot with my clients as well. They know what to do. They've read books, they've taken seminars, they've Googled, and in this day and age, it's not for lack of information that we don't change, right? We all have access to information that would change our lives. In 10 minutes, you could Google up something that would completely change your life if you could implement it. But what happens is they get the information, they know the knowledge, they know what to do, they could probably teach someone else to do it, but then they go into their lives and do what? The opposite, right? So instead of going to the gym, they find themselves eating potato chips in front of the television. Instead of reading the book, they find themselves scrolling on Instagram. And even though there's a discomfort and a pain to doing that, and they know that the pleasure isn't there, they find themselves doing it anyway. This is the acrasia effect. And there's a number.
Acrasia?
The acrasia effect,
okay.
yes.
All right. Okay.
So there are a number of reasons why we do this. I'm going to focus a lot on procrastination, on why it is that we do something in the now that feels pleasurable to us. It's because of something called hyperbolic discounting. So the mind perceives the value of what is right now, the pleasure, the physiological pleasure that is in this moment, and values it higher than a perceived benefit down the line. Okay, and this might be because way back in the primal days, it was for survival, right? Like we value what is right in front of us instead of what's perceived out there. This day and age, long-term goals, we're all setting them. We have, very few actual physical threats, immediate threats that we have to run away from. So we are still operating out of this tendency. So what do, right? So there was a great study called the marshmallow test. I'm sure that a lot of people have heard about the marshmallow test. It was done in the 1960s by
I never have.
Oh, you never have. So they put some 4-year-olds into a situation where they handed them a marshmallow. They put a marshmallow right in front of them and said, listen, you can eat the marshmallow right away, or I'm going to leave the room, and if you can wait for me to return 20 minutes from now, I'll give you 2 marshmallows. And they then filmed the 4-year-old's response or reactions in this situation, right? And what they found was really interesting. The psychologist was Walter Mischel, and he found that the children who were able to delay gratification for the 2 marshmallows, when they looked at their lives down the line, they had better measures of all sorts of things, body mass index, standardized test scores. They were more successful. Now, there have been some duplications of this, and there are some implications that affluence may factor into this. But it's definitely, without question, self-control is one of the biggest factors for success in human beings. If you
Is self-control and patience related?
It is, yes, but it's about being able to perceive that the benefit that you're going to get down the line is greater than the pleasure that you're experiencing now. We know from research that the pain and discomfort of procrastination is actually greater than the pain and discomfort that's associated with the thing that we're avoiding, and yet we're doing it anyway, right? So if we're able to override that sort of time inconsistency, if we are able to apply strategies, and we are, you're able to overcome this. We've shown this time and time again, then you can have success in life. You can set goals and come to be the type of person that you know will accomplish them. Keep your word to yourself and to others.
And I can pass up Scarlet Scoop and get in those 30 blue jeans that I want to get in.
Yes,
Is that the goal?
That is the goal, among other things.
How do I pass up Scarlet Scoop, though? What do you do? Just put put a poster board on the right window so you don't see it?
Well, there are a number of things. So let's talk about a few strategies that you can use. First of all, the mind, it's hard for the mind to perceive a big goal and to feel like it can accomplish a large scale goal, right? So this discouragement happens. When you think about motivation, motivation is that drive to do something right now, right? That push and that passion to do something right now, where procrastination is, I'll do it later, right? So you might tell yourself like, oh, in the moment you're valuing the pleasure of Scarlet Scoop over the pleasure of being healthy. These are two values of yours, you hold them both, but in that moment, because of the way that we're hardwired as human beings, Scarlet Scoop is here right now and I want to have the pleasure. It's important to remember that in all of these, you're basically overriding your rational thinking for the moment, the passion of the moment. So passion comes from the Greek pathos, which is suffering, okay? So we'll remember that. I don't know if you remember the last time we talked about the cool thinking versus the heated thinking, right? So when the limbic system is fired up, now you're operating out of that seat of emotion, whereas when your PFC, your prefrontal cortex, is up and you're cooled down, you're basically thinking more rationally. In all of these vectors, you are operating from those passions, from the seat of emotions. So first we have procrastination. That's a huge one. You can think of that as sort of like the going for the physiological pleasure of the moment versus that benefit that's way down the line. Well, I'll think about that later. I'll do it later, right? Anger. So in the heat of the moment, we often do things that override our rational thinking just because we're going with that passion. Wealth, so the abundance effect. So that's where if you're presented with a lot of money, research shows that you're more likely to participate in unethical behaviors. Then we have victory. So in competition, a lot of times people will do things outside of their rational thinking because they're in competition, even with road rage, right? And cutting people off and going faster, even though we really do know that it's not going to save us much time getting to our destination.
It's competition.
It's competition. Social status. So we don't want to be left out of the loop. We want human integration. So a lot of times we'll override our own. Maybe we'll be in college and instead of going to class, we're drinking with our buddies, even though we know we're going to feel like garbage tomorrow. But because it's part of the bonding of the social group, we do it. And then parenting. This is a big one. The relationship between parents and kids. Oftentimes, if the parent is busy projecting onto their kids or trying to, run their lives, they will be operating not against their child and their own best interest in the long run, not producing humans, adults that can operate well in the world, but they're just doing it because out of that feeling place.
Is there one of those six that is dominant, or are they all part of the gumbo?
They're all part of the gumbo. I believe that I work most with people who are dealing with procrastination, right? Putting things off. Here's what's interesting. Stanford did a research study where they took people and they did brain scans on them, and they told them to picture their present self. Okay, so they picture the present self, they do a brain scan, picture your future self, another brain scan, and then picture a stranger. Now, what they found was that some people, when they pictured their future self, the same neural pathways lit up as when they were actually picturing a stranger. For some people, it would be the same as self, right? So what they found is that if you have continuity in your thinking about your future self, you're actually less likely to procrastinate. If, however, you kind of think of your future self as someone else who has to deal with the consequences, like you're really kind of wired to think of your future self as a stranger, you're more likely to procrastinate because you're not actually thinking about the consequences landing on yourself. So one of the big things, odd enough as it is to remember that your future self is still you, and you're going to have to deal with the consequences of your delay.
I get in modes. A lot of people get in modes because some days or weeks I'll go clearing off the desk, getting everything done.
Yeah.
Then the next week I'll go, that wore me out last week, so I'm going to wait a little bit till week 3. Do people jump between modes?
They do, and a lot of it may be ego depletion. So ego depletion is where you are, when you're using a lot of self-control, what they find is that if you believe it, that the self-control is finite. So if you're spending a lot of time at work in self-control, you're more likely to go home and watch TV, for example, than go to the gym because you've depleted that self-control mode. So on the days whenever you are fresher, you may find yourself less likely to sabotage yourself because you have some self-control reserves to spare.
I go home and watch Yellowstone and watch all that ruckus show and live vicariously through them. You know?
Yes.
So there we go. All right.
Exactly.
All right. So let's wrap it up. 6 vectors. How do people get that discipline in their life when they feel it spiraling?
Well, so one of the main things is to chunk it up into mini habits. I say it's about creating a ritual. You heard me say this before. I would rather someone exercise 1 minute a day, 6 days a week, than 30 minutes 1 day a week, because it's about creating that ritual. So if you can set up smaller habits for yourself through the day, 1 minute of reading versus an hour of reading to start, and get the ritual going, you're more likely to actually establish the habit and then also grow that habit. So it's counterintuitive for some people, but do that. Get yourself some, we're social creatures. Get yourself some support. Have someone hold you accountable to your word. Create more reward systems for yourself. So my son, when he's cleaning up his room, I'll set a 2-minute timer. I'm like, all the clothes in 2 minutes, and he drives for that, makes it kind of a game, and then he can celebrate that little win. Then we go for the toys, etc. And then you want to make sure that you also are being with the pain of avoidance. So really kind of sit with that, lean into it, and understand that if you lean into the pain of not doing it and accept that as part of this, that if you get started, because that's always the hardest part, if you get started on what it is that your goal is, that you can actually have that feeling go away for yourself.
Consciousness versus subconscious.
Yeah. So
That's a big battle that goes on, isn't it?
it is. It absolutely is. And so a lot of people are beating themselves up because they can't seem to get their goals accomplished. They know exactly what to do. They can't get it done. I want you to know, first of all, that is completely normal. It's a human problem. It's not a you problem, okay?
Well, thank you confirming that, Andy. I appreciate it.
Here's the problem. We live in a day and age where all this information can come into us, but we're still hardwired to take things very slowly with our nervous system and things like that. So if you can think of the mind in 2 parts, think of it as the conscious mind and the subconscious mind, okay? The conscious mind being what we're using right now. It helps us with executive function, with making decisions, with critical thinking. And then the subconscious mind is actually the part where it's unconscious, it just rolls, right? So in the very beginning, for example, when you're learning to drive, you're using a lot of conscious mind to remember what to do, right? Like you got to put it in drive, you got to check the mirror, you've got to 10 and 2. Right. Very shortly afterward, though, it all gets into your limbic system, and before long, you don't even remember your drive from home to work, right?
Very true.
It's in your subconscious mind. It's in your limbic system. Now, it takes something to get into that automatic mode. Here's the problem. That we have a very short battery life on the conscious mind, okay? So 5% of our day is spent in conscious thinking. That battery can be reserved with things like just picking what to wear or deciding what to make for dinner, right? And then the rest of the time, then it's the 95% we're going according to our subconscious. Good, bad, right, or wrong, okay? So here's the great news. If we can create automaticity, and that is just basically a habit. It's you doing things that are good for yourself without actually having to think of the steps. If you can create automaticity of the positive strategies that you know will bring you to your best life or to your goals, then you don't have to think about them, right? And so it'll be as easy as brushing your teeth or tying your shoelaces, but how do you do that, right? Because people are trying to approach this. So here's the most important thing to remember. We only have so much capacity for change, most of us. Okay, so research has shown that if you approach just one thing, one habit for 30 days, and you put your intention into it, that you have about an 85% chance of actually getting that habit into your life, okay? If you try to approach 2 things, your chances drop down to 35%. 3 things, and your chances drop down to 5%. So how many of us are going, okay, I'm gonna start eating right, I'm gonna exercise, I'm going to start reading this book, and they attack all of these things all at one time, and very shortly afterward, they're doing nothing, right?
So New Year's resolution should be resolution.
Resolution. And it doesn't mean that you aren't going to make the incremental habits. It doesn't even mean that you're not going to make more than one thing happen at a time. It just means that you commit to the one, and then if you want to add on, so people ask, well, what should I not exercise and eat right at the same time? Of course you should, but let's commit to one. The exercise is a must, okay? And then also, let's eat right, but let's know that if we go off the path with the eating for the first 30 to 66 days is the average for building a habit, then it's okay, because as long as we stay consistent with the exercise and get that built in, then we can hyper-focus on the eating next.
You talked about subconscious. Some of my best times are when I daydream. That's important, daydreaming, isn't it?
Important, yes. Yes, of course. Especially someone who's online all the time thinking about, making decisions at work. To give yourself that downtime. Meditation is a really powerful thing, too, to bring your brain into alpha state so that there's recovery happening, right? So you're disengaging so that you can actually, and in silence is really good.
Right.
You'll actually build gray matter with both meditation and being in silence for a good bit of the day. So, yes, absolutely good for you.
And do people pick times to do that, or does everyone have a special time they can do it?
Well, no. So you can do it any time of the day. It's important to know that there are 2 times of the day where your brain is in theta state. And theta is imagination and creativity, but it's also when you're it's like a hypnotic state, okay? So right when you wake up and right before you go to bed, you're in theta state. These are 2 very powerful times where you can program your subconscious mind if you have programs and beliefs that are running and working against you, which we all do to some degree.
Right.
So if you're intentional with that 5% and you actually strategize around what do I want to change in my life, and you pick one thing at a time, and you stay consistent with habits like reviewing what you want out of your life before bed and then right when you wake up, kind of sandwiching it in, and staying consistent with your mini habits, even if it's just 5 jumping jacks a day at the same time. And then what research has shown is that if you actually create a plan, the more specific the plan is, the more likely you are actually to follow through with it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be right here by my desk doing 5 jumping jacks at 2 o'clock, and you have it written down, you're more likely to actually accomplish it, 2 to 3 times more likely. So it's really important to get intentional and use your 5% well.
You put a lot of pressure on them in this series, you know. Have you ever been in right in the morning, come up with this brilliant idea, but you're in this state where you're really not conscious, and then you're coming into consciousness, and you're scrambling to remember what it is, and I'm going, I just forgot what it was.
Yes, always keep a pen and paper by your bed. I'm a big believer in that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
pen and
Journal it
paper, and the
out.
minute you get it, just write
Catch
it
it.
down, because you're not going to remember it for long.
Right, yeah.
That's a powerful thing, subconscious to conscious, isn't it?
It's very powerful. It's everything, really.
It's the circuit for your brain, isn't it? Your soul.
It is. And look, just remember that good habits are just as addictive as bad habits. So you might as well switch them out. Switch out your bad habits for your good ones.
All right, there you have it. Debbie Cox DeNova giving us some good vibes here on HTV. And we will be back again next week with more Debbie. So we'll see you. More programming right here on HTV.